Hi, this is David Wheatley, and welcome to David Wheatley's podcast, episode 6. We are well underway. We are recording this in a giant metropolis, and partly it reminds me of having driven by these giant radio towers out in the middle of nowhere, and there would be a shack or a shed at the bottom, and that's where the DJ would be in the middle of the night, playing rock and roll hits, the album versions, broadcasting, and nobody there with them. I am fortunate enough to have two key people here in the studio with me. So the parallel is not quite complete, thankfully so. All right. I'm torn a bit as to how much background information to provide in terms of the development of the podcast, but I find it fascinating. Or should I just provide the results of our hard work? Well, episode 1 had just the voice and a slide. Episode 2, we added music and a burst of photos at the beginning and more credits. Episode 3, the same. Episode 4, which is being post-produced now, will have a new burst of photos along with episode 5, and that brings us to episode 6, but you already know that. So let's get on with it. I said at the end of 5 that we were going to talk about capitalism, a risky topic, and also altruism. Any word that has ISM at the end, that's a word to convey to the recipient of the word that it is a pursuit of something, usually an ideology. Socialism, capitalism. So if we take the ISM off the end and go with the remaining word, we're looking at a word called capital. Capital to me means stuff. That's the musician term for capital, is stuff. Economists think of it in terms of cash or cars or property. They call it real property, like real estate, real property, and houses. And musicians like to think about songs, playwrights, their plays, screenwriters, their screenplays, actors and actresses, their box office appeal, their ability to draw an audience into the theaters to see their movies when the movies open and beyond. And there's some more esoteric ways of looking at capital. One would be somebody's reputation that's tied into box office. The copyrights would be under the heading of intellectual property, which also includes patents. Somebody invents something. The Thomas Edison version from a few episodes ago, inventing the light bulb. Trademarks, the ability to use somebody's name or a product like Kleenex or Xerox. Those are bad examples because they fell into the public domain, but something more obscure would be a good example of a trademark. And so when we tie that into the social psychology of an individual, some interesting connections can be made. One is that individuals like to preserve themselves and protect themselves. We talked about cognitive dissonance and the anxiety that can create, and the techniques that can be used to reduce that anxiety. We also talked about defense theory. Well, one of the ways to reduce anxiety and the cognitive dissonance area is to have so many assets that even if everybody converges, like we talked about the amoebas coming up the hill and taking away all the stuff from the top amoeba, that they would still have some additional assets or capital somewhere else. And by having capital, the person with it is able to, in the case of money, write a check, remember those, or click on something on a computer and transfer dough from one place to another. And these days can be done on a global level. And so one person can transfer vast amounts of dough just by sitting at their computer and cause many, many things to happen because of that, and put activities into motion and implement other isms, other crusades, and finance them just by pressing those few buttons. I'll put a period there to pause. So we talked about democracy and how the amoebas down the hill wanted to have the vote so there would be a balance of power between the many amoebas in the valley and the few amoebas on the hill as part of the oligarchy. And that the people in the valley dislike the fact that the people on the hill and the oligarchy have way more capital than the people in the valley do. And the people up above are able to press a few keys on a computer and cause all sorts of things that happen that can adversely affect the valley people. So it's no wonder that the people in the valley and the amoebas in the valley are not so happy about the people on the hill and having so much capital. And so, as democracy kicked in and kicks in, and the power of the vote and majority vote comes to bear on the people and the amoebas on the hill have to give up some of their capital and spread it out around the valley amoebas so that they will have better lives and not be so disgruntled and not show up with pitchforks and flaming torches and try to burn everything down out of the expression of their cognitive dissonance, comparing what they have versus what they should have. And so the nice way, that's not a good word, the nice way that capital connects with social psychology is the individual trying to protect themselves and accumulating assets will try to accumulate as much capital as possible and hold on to it. And the more fearful they are, the more they will want to accumulate capital and hold on to it more and more rigorously by getting insurance policies, locking it up in Swiss bank accounts and other places where predators cannot get them. And so what this does is the people with the capital have more and more time on their hands. The valley amoebas are busy working because they're selling their labor, whereas the amoebas working in the capital get to kick back, lounge around the pool. These are stereotypes. Take extended vacations, hire people to do things, and then what is left to them, meaning the people with the capital, is the decisions about where to deploy it and where to use it. And so if the person with the capital is a selfish person, then they will not care about what happens to other people or the rest of the world for that matter. They will not care about pollution. They'll lock themselves in their homes with air-conditioned, double-paned windows, air-conditioned cars, go from the garage into the car, into somebody else's garage, and into their double-paned home. And if they see anybody, encampments and the like, we talked about that before, there'll be no pause or concern given to those people. And while this fits a stereotype of wealthy people not caring about the little people, of course there are many that do, but also there are some that don't. And that's why the lower level amoebas pass legislation to force by law the people with a ton of dough to part with enough of it to provide social services and safety nets and the public education that we talked about. And so in that way, it's an effective balance. The good thing about capitalism, as I see it, is it has the good aspects of competition. My mind goes immediately to field day we had in elementary school where the students would converge around the university track and run, which was then the 100-yard dash or the 50-yard dash, or for the older kids, the 440. Or I guess whatever that adds up to, close to a mile. Maybe it was a mile. And the better athletes were able to win. And the ones who were not so good came in with later prizes, or in some cases no prizes, and there was a substantial segment of students who were not able to compete in these particular endeavors due to physicality. Nevertheless, everybody seemed to be allocated their share of talents, which are also a part of capital. And so the intellectual types were able to succeed back in the classroom by solving math problems and winning at spelling bees and painting something beautiful or playing something fantastic at the piano. And so capital, I believe, should be considered in the broadest possible way. And because of that, everybody is dealt their own cards of capital, and they get to play them the way they want to. And to be imaginative and create opportunities. Different people have different opportunities. There's been a lot of attention drawn recently to certain social groups that don't have the same opportunities as others do. And doesn't sound fair to me. I think everybody should at least get to start off at the starting line, at the starter pistol, going up in the air, shooting a blank, and start the race and see where people end up. And that this figurative race needs to happen with all kinds of talent. And so we can find and identify what people's strengths are, which are also a part of capital, and then find ways to use them for their own benefit and also for the benefit of society at large. Not just the society at large, but the individuals within the society at large. And if there are 7 billion people on the planet, surely by now we have computers that can identify each of the 7 billion. No, we don't want everybody tracked and their movements and all that, even though maybe Google's already doing that, profiling everybody for marketing purposes. There could and should be a way for one individual with a certain talent to be able to engage with another individual somewhere around the globe who needs that talent, and that there would be an exchange. One offers the talent, the capital of that, and the recipient offers the capital of whatever they have, either by barter or some cash, probably US dollars or some other form of currency that is widely used on a global level, or actually specifically used for this transaction. And so these are some of my thoughts on capitalism, and altruism is going to be coming up in the next, I'm going to say edition because it sounds more formal. I'd like to do a few credits, though, as this series of podcasts transition from being conversational to being slightly more academic. I'd like to give some credits that the social psychology, much of what I've learned on that comes from the SAGE Handbook of Social Psychology. SAGE is a publisher of books. As I understand it, they're based in London, but they also have an office in California, I think Woodland Hills. And also the music interval example I learned long ago from a book, and I'm not sure where the author of that book got it from, but nevertheless, his name is a deceased but memorable person I hold in the highest regard, named Gordon Delamont, Delamont, published by Kendor, Kendor Music. So if you'd like to contribute to this worthy cause, please go to Patreon, patreon.com/David Wheatley, and send us some of your hard-earned capital, and we will put it to good use. And with that, I'm signing off from episode 6.